Hello, this is Ted Ritzer. I'm the host of the next iteration of the Greening Government webinar series. My name is Ted Ritzer. I work with Alberta Environment and Parks, and we're kicking off a new series with a new executive champion, ADM Sandra Locke of the new Alberta Climate Change Office is our champion. And today we're lucky to have a presentation by Lliam Hildebrand of an organization that's pretty interesting. He represents the Oil Sands Workers of Canada. His organization is Earth and Iron. Maybe, Lliam, you want to say hello to the folks? Anyways, today we're going to be chatting.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much.
Excellent. So today we're going to be chatting with Lliam. The format of the presentation, this series, is usually we have 40 minutes reserved for the presentation that Lliam will deliver, and also the remainder is 20 minutes with a Q&A function that people within the webinar, if you hover your cursor on the screen, you'll see a Q&A function where you can pose questions. So to start the presentation, Lliam, I guess we'll get you to share the screen and we'll go to the presentation, and I'll do that bit of an introduction with the promo video for your organization starting there. How about? Absolutely.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Ted. We're Iron and Earth, and we're very excited to be doing what we're doing in Alberta today and to be presenting to everyone. And like to start off with a bit of a video that we've put together on our website. Kind of gives an overview of what we're all about.
We are Iron and Earth, oil sands workers for renewable energy. My name's Lliam, and I'm an oil sands worker myself. A fourth-generation Boilermaker, I grew up on the BC coast, and I'm passionate about protecting our environment.
Hey, how's it going, Jimmy? Good to see you, buddy.
I've tried to find work in renewable energy, but year after year, the only jobs available to me are in the oil and gas sector. While leading industrial nations like China, America, and Germany are creating millions of green jobs, Canada just seems stuck on one idea: the fossil fuel economy. I think that needs to change, and I'm not alone. Many of my fellow oil sands workers are starting to think this way. People like Randall Benson, who has built a successful solar company creating jobs through training and installation.
There are 175 watts at standard test condition, which is 25 degrees. I had to make a plan for me to be in this new renewable energy field.
We are skilled workers. Electricians, iron workers, pipe fitters, boilermakers, carpenters, and many more trades. And we could easily transfer our knowledge to the green economy.
What better way to inform the other side than to come from the workers already inside and ask them what they think? Like, I'm out here making a living and I enjoy it, but I still see a need for renewable energy.
A lot of them are really conflicted, myself being one of them. I think a lot of people would want to make that shift, actually.
Instead of having one egg in the basket, so to speak, we could have people doing what we have here, installing solar on roofs. That could put a lot of people to work, especially in those bust cycles when the oil and gas industry isn't doing so well.
If we had leaders, people with vision, we'd actually work towards a sustainable energy future.
With a new federal government and a booming global renewable energy sector, now is the time to harness the skills of Canada's oil sands workers. So join Iron and Earth and help us build a strong, vibrant, green economy for all Canadians.
Great, there's that video to give some context, and now we'll switch over to this interview with Shannon Phillips.
Yeah, no, I think it's a nice sort of response to that video, Lliam. And the interview was done in Paris with Climate TV January of this year.
Well, you know, what matters to Alberta is ensuring that our energy economy is resilient for the challenges that come ahead. And certainly that's why we have undertaken very ambitious policies with respect to pricing carbon, with respect to our methane management strategy, with respect to our performance standards for large industrial emitters, and an efficiency strategy. We've also phased out coal. We have an ambitious target for 2030 to replace 2/3 of our coal fleet with renewables. We've undertaken this broad range of policies because we know that Alberta can lead again. Well, I think that Alberta's role on the international stage is to prove that an international energy producer can undertake responsible actions and can be that responsible energy producer for now into the future. And that's our role, is to refurbish our international reputation as Albertans, to ensure that our access to global markets is based on good, solid science and good, solid innovation and sustainability.
Well, while you're loading up the slides presentation, Lliam, I just wanted to chat with you about that comment that you made about oil sands workers from Canada. Because, you know, when I was a boy growing up on the farm in Manitoba 50 years ago, we used to have some farmers there, the Humes brothers. After seeding, they'd jump in a truck and head for Alberta to work as high-pressure welders on the pipeline. So your comment about oil sands workers and energy workers in Alberta as actually workers in Canada, I think is significant for both Albertans and Canadians to understand that a lot of people who work in the oil and gas sector and in the oil sands actually choose to make their homes in another place of Canada.
I think a lot of people think about oil sands workers and they think automatically rig workers, kind of unskilled workers on the rigs from Alberta, and them being the ones that are affected by this decline in oil prices and this dependency on this one single kind of oil and gas industry. And what the situation is really is that we're actually a bunch of very highly skilled tradespeople from all across the country, and it's taken a national effort to build the oil sands and to maintain the oil sands. And it's created jobs all across the country and has led to economic growth, not only in Alberta, but in a lot of the coastal provinces as well. And I know that I've definitely really relied on this work over the last 6 years, because we just have not had work in Victoria to put people like myself to work, using our welding skills, using our steel fabricating skills. And a lot of people on the East Coast in Newfoundland, particularly, they're getting hit incredibly hard by the slowdown in the oil sands right now.
Great. Well, now I think it's time for the main event, so to speak, as far as your main presentation, Lliam. Can't wait to see it.
Yeah, we already covered the basics, so I'll kind of skip over this slide. But basically, we are Iron and Earth, and we're a group of oil sands workers that are really excited about the potential of renewable energy to create a new type of work scope for our trades. And I'm going to go over some of the details about our vision, some of our goals as an organization, and some of the campaigns that we're working on, and some of the projects we have in sight. So kind of a different way to start off this presentation is to give a little bit of a background on kind of who I am and how I ended up living in Victoria and working in the oil sands and starting this organization. I actually had an opportunity when I was 13 to go live in Vanuatu. It's an island nation in the South Pacific, very close to Fiji. And I lived pretty much off the land for most of my time there. My dad was a volunteer doctor there, and I basically spent all of my time in the jungle, living in grass huts with my friends and hunting wild boars and really just harvesting wild fruits. And I ended up getting a custom name given to me by the chief. I'm on the right there, and so they named me Now Kaut, which means great warrior and leader. So still trying to do them proud with the work I do. And when I came back from Vanuatu, I got into kind of tried to learn how to live off the land in Victoria, but it just didn't really work like that. And so I ended up getting into skateboarding instead, and I started welding. And when I graduated, I got into a steel fabricating shop, and we built a lot of really, really interesting mega projects. This one here is a ship loader that I worked on, loaded coal, and in the Tawasin Bay ferry terminal. And I worked on a number of drilling rigs that we built in Victoria, and we shipped up into Alberta. I also built a wide range of pressure vessels, primarily for Alberta as well. And these are very specialized, highly critical pieces of infrastructure that require very highly skilled tradespeople to manufacture these components. And we were able to construct some pretty impressive steel infrastructure out of this shop in Victoria. And I balanced the passion I developed for the environment in Vanuatu. While I was doing my steel fabricating apprenticeship, I built a log cabin in the woods with my friends to kind of keep the environmental and the industrial kind of side of things balanced. And eventually we actually started to get some contracts building some renewable energy projects. So here's a picture of a biomass plant that we fabricated. This is actually located in Victoria, and it takes waste wood and creates energy out of waste wood. And around this time, I was just finishing up my first apprenticeship, steel fabricating apprenticeship, when I watched the Al Gore movie, Inconvenient Truth. And it was definitely an eye-opener for me, and I started to do some research over the following days and realized that global warming was very likely going to be the challenge of my generation. And so I decided to really dive in and kind of commit my life to figuring out how to use my trade skills to build the renewable energy infrastructure that's going to be required to address this problem. I felt very torn between what I was producing in terms of pressure vessels and oil rigs and what we could be building, like this project that I was also part of, which was a wind farm weather station, which was installed in the Hecate Strait to calculate the potential for wind energy in BC. And as I worked my way through my apprenticeship, I ended up finishing two trades. I'm a steel fabricator, red seal journeyman, and I'm also a red seal welder. I have my B pressure ticket. And as I was kind of continuing to work in the oil sands, I found opportunities to really try to really bring to life what I had learned in Vanuatu in terms of my respect for the environment. So I started an organization called Social Coast, and I was involved in the reclamation of the traditional name of a local mountain called Pecals, and also known as Mount Douglas. And we did a reenactment of the signing of the treaties locally, and it was a very powerful event. We had 800 people march up to the top of this mountain and install this sign. That was about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, and the sign's still there. It was a very positive event for a lot of the local First Nations people. So I have a bit of a background in kind of some organizing work, and it's been an interesting kind of double life. This is a a picture on site of where I spend most of my work hours is inside these pressure vessels that are producing oil. It's a pretty intense job. Spend a lot of your time inside these steel kind of pieces of infrastructure, all suited up. This is in a type of environment where there's a bit more exposure to some extra hazards, and so we make sure we suit up for those types of operations. And so that's a bit of a background of kind of where I'm coming from. And where Iron and Earth really started was last spring. We were working a 3-month shutdown at Nexen Long Lake, and what the conversations kept on coming back to was, I'll come back to that slide, was the price of oil. As you can see in this little image, around 2015, spring 2015, we were at the bottom of a pretty serious price drop. And at the same time, we had unemployment levels absolutely skyrocketing. And obviously this was really top of mind for everybody on the job. And another stat that was overlapped onto that data was the current CO2 levels. And so the conversations really kept on coming back to, well, right now we have a lot of the world moving away from oil and gas. We're losing work because of our dependency on this single resource, and we have to address this massive issue that's a global problem, and Canada has a pretty significant role to play in addressing climate change and CO2 levels. And we got really excited about what was happening around the world in terms of renewable energy. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the renewable energy stats that we were looking at as well. So in 2015, there was $329 billion invested in renewable energy, compared to in 2005. As you can see, it's a little bit closer to the 50 billion mark. So within a decade, we're seeing a tremendous increase in the flow of capital towards renewable energy sources. And so we decided we were going to start this organization to help catalyze the renewable energy sector in Canada. And just a bit of a humorous image here. Just like truly strap on a rocket onto the slow-moving renewable energy sector, specifically in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and watch it take off. So as an organization, our core value, we decided, was that energy development has to prioritize the health and equity of workers, families, communities, the economy, and the environment. And we really believe that all of those parameters can be met, and there's no reason why moving forward into transitioning to 100% renewable energy that we can't ensure that all of those are looked after. And our vision became, and so all of these conversations about what is our vision, what are our values, and what are our goals as an organization came about on the job site at those 3 months that we were working at Nexen Long Lake. There was a lot of time that you're spending in these steel vessels with your coworkers. You have a lot of lunchroom conversations, and every day there was a couple hours worth of conversations around, okay, what are we going to do about this? What can we actually do as workers to change this situation? We felt very disempowered in a way because these issues are so large and so complex and seem beyond our control. But we figured maybe there is a chance for us to do something about it. And that's proven to be the case so far, based on the conversations we've been having. Our voice is actually being really listened to, and that's very exciting to us. So our vision is that the global climate targets are met. We want to make sure that 1.5 degrees is at least a possible scenario and something that we do consider moving forward in our energy development. We want to make sure that Canada is doing their fair share globally, and that we can develop a renewable energy sector that's conducive to a 1.5 degree scenario. That being said, actually ensuring that global warming does not exceed 1.5 degrees is extremely unlikely at this point, but it's still one of these moonshot goals that I think is worth striving towards. And we certainly need to be in alignment with the 2 degree scenario, which is obviously an internationally binding agreement at this point. So our 3 main goals, if you take into consideration our values and our vision, is we said, okay, well, what needs to happen? What are the key priorities to ensuring that we can meet our global climate targets and that energy development is benefiting this wide range of stakeholders and communities and families? We figured, okay, well, first of all, we really need to build up the public and workforce support for this ambitious renewable energy development. Number 2, we need to build up the workforce and manufacturing capacity. And third is sort of more of an internal goal, is to really build a community around this. Because what we're finding is there's a lot of workers coming to us saying, thank you so much for existing. This is incredibly inspiring. I thought I was alone in my views maybe, and it feels really exciting to be part of a community that's kind of moving forward into a more positive direction. And our strategy is really based on 4 pillars. So collaboration, really want to work positively with all stakeholders. We really hope this organization is never divisive. We have a really 100% focus on a solutions-based strategy. We're not saying to shut down the oil sands or anything like that. We're saying, okay, there is definitely room for the oil sands to continue providing us all with the jobs that we need. I know that I still currently rely on my employment in the oil sands, and we realize that if we can bring together the oil and gas companies and the oil and gas and coal unions and the various contractors that are working in these different sectors, and build a positive organization together. Our second pillar is research. So we really want to be grounded in facts, and we don't want to be promoting a message that is too based on ideology and just wishful thinking. There's a lot of really difficult realities in regards to a transition to renewable energy and utilizing this massive workforce across Canada into new industries. And our third pillar is training, because what we've identified is that training is the most significant gap towards people finding employment in the renewable energy sector. And it's also one of the most low-hanging fruit in terms of there's a lot of 5-day training programs that skilled tradespeople can go through and really be opened up to opportunities in a wide range of renewable energy sectors. And fourth, our pillar is advocacy. So we believe as a workforce, as workers, we can have a pretty significant voice calling for ambitious renewable energy development if we can kind of band together. So that's our organization overview. And now I'm going to dive into some of our specific campaigns. And I think I have about 12 or 13 minutes left here. So I want to leave some time for questions. Our first campaign was actually working with the Boilermakers Union. As I am a Boilermaker myself, I've been in the union for over a decade now. And a lot of the people I was having these initial conversations with were Boilermakers as well. So as a new organization, we didn't want to take on too much at once. And so we figured, okay, well, let's start small. Let's focus specifically on helping the Boilermakers Union transition, not even transition. We don't try not to use that word too much, because what we really wanted to do was incorporate renewable energy projects into our work scope. And if we figured if we could start there, that would be a really positive step. And so we developed a renewable energy activation program, which included 6 phases and looked at number 1, where emissions reductions are going to take place across Canada as we transition to 100% renewable energy. What types of industries that's going to impact, which ones are going to decline and which ones are going to grow. We're going to look at what kinds of specific jobs that was going to create for various trades, and specifically the Boilermakers. We're going to look at how we could acquire some of that work scope, what the gaps were, and any training gaps, and any proactive measures we could take to ensure, as Canada develops a renewable energy sector, that we acquire that work. We're still in conversations with the Boilermakers about doing this program with them. But in January of this year, we had spent a number of months, probably almost half a year, working with the Boilermakers in conversation about this concept, and it was just moving too slowly for us. And we're really hoping that the Boilermakers are still going to come on board, and we have a lot of really positive relationships we have developed. But we found that a more streamlined route in terms of kind of getting out there and starting to build up a membership and having some positive impact was to do our solar skills campaign. So as we were researching various renewable energy technologies and different training programs, we recognized that there was a lot of electricians that could take a 5-day training program to be skilled up in solar PV. And then all of a sudden they have the skills to not only work in the oil and gas or the coal sector, but to also work on installing rooftop solar PV systems. And so we decided to launch a campaign calling for the retraining of 1,000 electricians into the solar industry. There's actually really great solar resources in southern Alberta. A lot of our solar resources are better than Germany, which has definitely pursued solar very ambitiously, and better than Ontario in most regions. So we did a press conference on March 21st in Edmonton. It was a very exciting event for us, and a little bit nerve-wracking, but we pulled it together, and it was received very positively. A couple members of the government of Alberta did show up to the press conference, and were very encouraging of us and our concept. to retrain electricians into solar PV and recognized the value of what we were doing. And they encouraged us to submit an official proposal, which we actually just did last week. So at first we were focused specifically on doing, so retraining 1,000 workers. That is a 2-phase campaign. So phase 1, we are focused on completing 10 demonstration projects within the first year. And those 10 demonstration projects will train 100 workers total. Then we're going to use what we've learned from those first 10 projects and develop a replicable model, which we'll use to complete the remaining 90 projects. So each training program can fit about 10 students on average. And we are going to be doing these installations on the roofs of high schools, primarily on flat roofs, if possible, just for the ease of training. And also for the scalability will be a little bit easier on the flat roofs. And since we launched, we have been approached by a wide range of stakeholders in the renewable energy sector, including a solar heating contractor. Eclipse Solar has come up to us and laid out a very good business case for the solar heat installations to be part of this program. And so we actually ended up working with them to develop a 5-day hands-on solar heating training program, and that is now included into this whole training package. And we've also incorporated an energy retrofit and optimization component. As we were researching these issues, it became very clear that energy retrofits and optimizations are a really critical component and have the highest return on investment. Solar PV, it makes a lot of sense in very specific situations, but energy retrofits and optimizations are really where you get the best value for the dollar invested. And we've also incorporated an electrical vehicle charging station installation component. So this is the 24-hour training program, and we feel that this is an important part of the overall skills that electricians can develop, is the installation of these charging stations, because I think we're really going to see a rapid move towards electrical vehicles, as we've seen with the recent launch of the new affordable Tesla vehicles. So our training programs are specifically situated on high schools, not because we see it as a really great opportunity to introduce the opportunities of renewable energy trades and a wide range of renewable energy skills like engineering and design to high school students. There's a lot of high school students that we've seen be very engaged in these issues in Alberta, and we're really excited that we've developed a high school curriculum component where we are going to kind of do a tour of the various renewable energy installations and also have some classroom activities where we dive into the kind of opportunities in renewable energy and why some of the importance behind this industry. So another thing we're doing is, as Ted mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, is that there really is workers from all sides of the country that are significantly impacted by this price drop in oil. And we had a gentleman from Newfoundland attend the press conference and join our organization, Adam Cormier. He's an electrician out there who's worked in the oil sands quite a bit. And when he arrived home, there was a real outpouring of interest from workers in his community. And so within a couple weeks of launching, we hosted this very successful gathering at a local pub to discuss these issues. And since then, Iron and Earth East has grown pretty rapidly and has a pretty inspiring vision for doing some demonstration projects and some training programs in Newfoundland. So we really have 3 campaigns or projects that we're working on. So the first one I explained was the Solar Skills campaign. I just went over the Iron and Earth East chapter. And our third campaign that we're working on is the Workers' Climate Plan. So right now, the federal government is in the middle of a national climate strategy consultation process, and we want to make sure that workers have a platform to provide input into that process. So one of the things that we're focused on is we've developed this workers' climate plan framework. And so number one, we want to make sure that the national climate strategy is really focused on building up the workforce capacity of workers in Canada to develop the renewable energy sector. Number two, we want to make sure that the manufacturing of renewable energy technologies can happen in Canada. Number three, we want to position unions and contractors into the renewable energy sector, similar to the renewable energy activation program we've been developing for the Boilermakers. And I'm very sorry, I'm just noticing there's still an asterisk here. We have received broader membership input, and so this is our official thing. That was lingering. Okay, so there we go. So now the 2 development priorities that we're really focused on is making sure that energy development in Canada is in alignment with the 1.5 degree scenario, at least a 2 degree scenario with ambitions to meet the 1.5. And we also, like I mentioned, want to ensure that energy development prioritizes the health and equity of workers, families, communities, the economy, and the environment. And so in closing, I have a few minutes of examples of the various technologies and what that actually looks like for sort of job creation in terms of really practical examples. So wind is obviously one of the primary renewable energy technologies that is coming online across the world. Primarily wind and solar are really, really dominating the industry. And here's a picture of a wind tower being fabricated in a fabricating shop. For anyone who's spent any time in a fabricating facility, this is a pretty common image. We have some rolled steel plate that's been connected. We've got them on rollers, a bunch of welding and fabricating happening. This is exactly what it looks like during the beginning stages of building a pressure vessel. So a lot of the existing manufacturing facilities that we have could feasibly be kind of refitted to build large wind infrastructure. There's also some small scale wind technologies out there that could provide jobs for some smaller fabricating shops. This isn't technology that's necessarily going to be widely deployed, but has some application in rural settings. We also have geothermal. So geothermal is a very interesting technology, and this is actually a geo-exchange unit here. This is a geothermal unit. So the difference between geo-exchange is this technology will take heat from the sun that has warmed up the earth and convert it into heat, and then geothermal power is actually drilling down so far that you tap into the heat from the core of the earth and creating either electricity or heat out of that. And it's pretty obvious just looking at this image that this is very similar infrastructure to oil and gas facility and would employ a lot of the same types of workers. In Iceland, they've deployed geothermal power very broadly, and we actually have a lot of geothermal potential in Alberta. It's a completely different type of geothermal than Iceland has, though, because Iceland is more similar to BC in terms of the geology, where you have the volcanic activity and the real bedrock formations. And then in Alberta, you have a warm sedimentary sand base that we can tap into. Also waste power and fuels. Biomass facilities utilize heat exchangers and a lot of the exact types of components that other electrical generating stations use. There's also a pretty exciting project in Edmonton's landfill. It's called Enercam, which takes waste and turns it into a type of biofuel. And also run-of-river projects are a reasonably sustainable way to create energy in some river ecosystems. And also there's going to be a huge push towards storage technologies. There's some pretty interesting technologies under development right now that utilize exchanger technologies and various storage modules to store waste heat and redeploy it through a series of steel piping. And a lot of this work would definitely go to these tradespeople that are in the sector right now. And lastly, one of our big dreams is to one day start something more similar to actually becoming a contractor of some kind. We're hoping that as we build up our membership of skilled tradespeople and develop a specialized knowledge in the renewable energy sector, that we may actually emerge as a social enterprise that develops renewable energy technologies and can really put some people to work. So there's a lot more to talk about. It's a reasonably long presentation, but it really just skims the surface of kind of what we're looking at. So I'm interested in starting to answer some questions here.
Excellent, Liam. I'll just open up the Q&A function and start with some of those questions. So first question I've got here is, the Alberta government has committed to rapidly increase the amount of renewable energy generation in the province. So how can we, as the government of Alberta, help Iron and Earth specifically when we can't really pick winners and losers?
Interesting. Well, one of the things that you can do, well, we just submitted this official proposal, the Solar Skills campaign proposal, to get 10 projects completed, which include the solar PV, the solar heat, the energy efficiencies, and the EV charging stations. We're really hoping that they're going to come through. It's a $4 million proposal. Sent it to the federal government and the provincial government of Alberta. We're asking for matching funding, as well as $200,000 from industry stakeholders. And so any relationships that you have that you can help encourage that the government adopts that proposal would be extremely helpful.
Okay. And the second question here was, why was the 1,000 worker target established? Does 1,000 workers represent a base need for the sector right now?
Yeah, 1,000 seemed like the appropriate number. It's a very round number, obviously, but we were talking to a lot of solar industry stakeholders, and it's this interesting push and pull scenario where we're actually not going to see large-scale solar being developed in Alberta for another couple years in terms of utility scale. Obviously, there's this large renewable procurement process that's underway here, and there's a lot of policy details that are going to be kind of laid out in the fall to see if there's going to be a solar carve-out in terms of utility scale solar development. If there is a solar carve-out, we're going to need hundreds of electricians and possibly upwards of thousands. It really depends on how much kind of solar is going to be part of the mix there. And we decided that 1,000 was the same number of electricians that Randall Benson, who is our training provider, has already trained. So Randall has trained 1,000 electricians in solar PV over the last 10 years or so. And we wanted to take that number and replicate it within a much more compact program and just get a wider range of workers deployed. And there's a certain amount of distribution we need for these workers, because some of them are going to live in Fort McMurray, some of them are going to live in Edmonton and Calgary and in a lot of different rural communities. So to ensure that there's enough workers in the various communities, you really need to have that distributed skilled workforce.
Yeah, well, excellent. So the next question for you, Lliam, is, so what about the guys that have worked on the rigs for years and have a trade certificate in the rig industry? What are you guys going to do for these men as per work? How are you going to get them all back to work in the green industry?
Yeah, we certainly can't promise that we're going to get them all back to work in the green industry. I think there's a lot of potential for rig workers to be employed in the geothermal sector, but there's also, this is a really long-term conversation in a way as well. We're not saying that we're going to be able to redeploy these workers immediately into the renewable energy sector, but it's something that we need to look at immediately. Obviously, we should have been looking at this a few years ago, because right now we're in a situation where we're not prepared at all for what is happening. So we want to really seriously look at removing some of the barriers around around geothermal energy development, because that is definitely one sector where their skills are directly transferable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another question here, and here's the question or comment. I'm a man-made climate change skeptic, but totally support renewable energy initiatives. Is there room for people like me in organizations like yours, Lliam?
Oh, I like that question. Yes, absolutely. We're certainly not, and there are other people in our organization that share that same ideology, and I think that's why our initiative is pretty inspiring for a lot of people that find themselves in this middle ground where they don't identify as environmentalists by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of our base is people that do care deeply about climate change and the environment, but a lot of people are part of this initiative because they just see it as a very economically sound argument and way to be going. There is a lot of countries that are becoming, are benefiting greatly from renewable energy development. Canada can hopefully see the same.
Okay, and another question for you is, are you doing anything to reach out specifically to underrepresented populations within the sector to provide them with these new skills, for example, women or racial minorities?
So our first Our first solar project is actually going to be in the Louis Bull tribe in the Masquatchis First Nations, about an hour south of Edmonton. We actually had a meeting yesterday with the school board from the community. We had our Joe Bachu, who's one of our members, and we had our Eclipse Solar go and have a meeting with them yesterday, and they're very excited about doing the first project in their community. So these first 10 projects are grant-based, and the benefit of the projects are going to go to the communities themselves. And so we want to see this benefit go to these First Nations communities primarily, if possible. It may be more logistically feasible to just focus on a single school board in Edmonton and another school board in Calgary, and just kind of do 5 projects in each region to make sure that we complete our projects within a reasonable timeline. But this relationship was pretty easy to develop and pretty streamlined. So we hope to replicate what we're going to be doing in Masquatchis in other First Nations communities. Mm-hmm. In terms of women as well, like, we'll definitely give priority to women in the trades. Make sure that we have a mixture of tradespeople going through our program. Absolutely. And we're actually going to be training the community members of the First Nations communities, along with the tradespeople. We'll have a certain mix. Obviously, it can't be all the community members or all women or anything like that. That wouldn't make any sense, but we'll have a mixture.
Oh, excellent. So another question for you, Lliam, is solar and wind require upfront capital installation. There is less maintenance. Do you worry about training too many workers for peak construction? They might not have jobs in the long run.
This is why we need to really look at this as the diversification of the work scope. This isn't 100% transition from one sector to another. This is a long game strategy. We need to be incorporating renewable energy projects into the scenario. So imagine myself, when I go to the union hall, I want to be able to pick off of the list and have renewable energy as one of the options on that list, right? And then, so if I hammer out a wind project, I can then go back to the hall and say, hey, okay, wrap that up. I need another job. And then I go work up in the oil sands, or I go work on a coal shutdown, or whatever it is, right? So it's going to be a process. And eventually, I mean, by the time we're no longer seeing any new construction jobs in the oil and gas industry, hopefully by then it's a lot more clear. But the first steps are really, okay, we have an opportunity to start moving this direction. Let's figure it out. Let's make it happen.
Okay, and I'll just sort of a last call for any more questions from our webinar participants today. If you'd like to post the questions within the Q&A window. We're coming up on 11:55, so we've got a few more minutes for questions to be fielded by Lliam. I guess in the meantime, while people are kind of this last call for questions, Lliam, I just kind of wanted to make a comment, maybe on behalf of some of my neighbors who work in the sort of the oil and gas pipeline and oil sands industries. It's been a while for me moving out into that area. It's been interesting to see the stereotypes that, or preconceptions that I had in terms of workers, be kind of blown away with the reality of the individuals when you get to know them. So it seems to me your organization has in part an education function just to help folks like myself with these preconceptions to understand a little more about our neighbors.
Absolutely, 100%. And I was always so amazed going into the oil sands for the first time 6 years ago. Already environmentally, and I kind of really wore my heart on my sleeve and had these conversations right off the bat with these coworkers of mine. And I was blown away. My own stereotypes of these workers was blown away, and have continued to really, it's been reaffirmed year and year again. Every single year I go up, and these are good people. These are with families. These are hunters. They're fishermen. These are feed their families, but they care about the environment. Of course they do. I think everybody cares about the environment. You know, I don't think there's really many people out there that are like, oh, whatever, the environment doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, absolutely, Liam. So we're coming up onto noon, and I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to present to us on your organization. It's a pretty different organization. I was pretty amazed at some of the interviews that you've done previously, and that generated the interest to extend the invitation. So, Liam, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us here in Alberta, and I wish you well in your organization, Liam.
Thank you so much, Ted. I really appreciate the opportunity to present our vision, and I really hope if anyone wants to reach out, please contact Lliam at ironandearth.org, and I'll be happy to answer any further questions.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for presenting today, Lliam.
Great.
And
Okay.
thank you. And thanks to everybody that joined into our webinar today. We'll be having another webinar at the end of July, so stay tuned. And thanks so much for joining us today, Lliam.
Great. Thanks.
Take care.